Welcome back to the Tapes Archive podcast, where we release interviews that have never been heard before. Please listen to episode 000, an introduction for the full backstory about this podcast series. On this episode, we have Machine Gun Trey Anastasio of the band Phish. At the time of this interview in 1993, Phish was on tour supporting their third album, A Picture of Nectar. And in the interview, Trey talks about how Phish practices their musical improv techniques, what music will look like in the year 2000, and how he'd like to start a family. At the time, Trey was 29 years old and on the cusp of becoming an acclaimed musician. For me, Trey is right up there with Hendrix, Zappa, and any other guitar great you can think of. On a side note, I have to tell you about the later strange connection between the interviewer Mark Allen and Trey. On August 10th, 1997, Mark reviewed Phish's concert at Deer Creek Music Center in Noblesville, Indiana, and wrote one of the most negative reviews he's ever written. One line in the review that stands out, and I quote, "Phish could urinate in its fans' ears and tell them it's music. The fans in turn would be there with tape recorders to capture the moment." Unquote, Mark Allen, August 11th, 1997. The review was forwarded to Trey, and he read it aloud in front of cameras that were rolling for the upcoming documentary Bittersweet Motel. While Mark riled up wooks across the U.S. with his review, Trey seemed to understand where Mark was coming from and took the critique in the most Trey way. If you'd like to see Trey's reaction, I have put a link to that video clip in the show notes and on our website. Before we get to the interview, we have a couple of housekeeping items. If you would like to support the show, please go over to the website at thetapesarchive.com and click on the support button. On there, you'll find many ways to show your support for the show, and all of them are free. While on the website, check out Mark's blog for more context of this interview and for some personal insight from Mark himself. The music that is playing is by the Budos Band. Please head over to wherever you get music and check them out. I can tell you from personal experience, this band will blow you away. While listening to the podcast, if you have any questions about the interview, please send them to thetapesarchive@gmail.com. We are going to do another podcast in the future featuring and answering your questions. One last thing, the Tapes Archive podcast is a proud member of the Osiris Podcast Network, a global community connecting passionate fans with podcasts and experiences about artists and topics you love. Thanks for tuning in, and now it's time to open the vault.
How are you doing?
Just fine. How are you?
Great, thanks.
Good. Were you in Cincinnati? Is that...
I'm in Cincinnati.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Just checking my area code knowledge, you know.
Oh, yeah.
You must be having the same ugly, looks like it's going to rain day that we're having.
We're not.
Really?
Not outside my window.
Oh, my God.
There's some clouds on the horizon, but it's the sun is beaming through where I am.
Gee, we're only 100 miles away, but on to the real issues at hand here.
World peace.
Yes, world peace. World peace and Phish music. Okay. In these days, I mean, where you sort of have to have a little niche to fit in and an explanation for everything. How do you guys get away with this?
How do we get away with it?
Yeah.
Perseverance?
Uh-huh.
I think that might be it. We've been going for about 10 years now, and just basically making decisions based on what we really, I hope making decisions based on what we really enjoy doing, as opposed to what would be, something that would make the big bucks or whatever. Boy, that sounds idealistic, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that having a whole lot of fun. We had planned on being a sort of a touring act from the beginning. If there was a conscious decision, it was to do that, to get our lives into the situation where we could support ourselves from touring. And so decisions were made with that in mind, I think.
So no plan to be a big record-selling band. Just you want people to come out and see you. And,
well, that was the. There was never. We never talked about getting signed, or we never pursued that. We always pursued buying a better sound system and practicing, doing musical exercises that would improve improvisation and stuff like that. That always seemed to sort of be the goal, and everything else just fell naturally into place.
So what kind of improvisational exercises can you do?
Well, we've been doing things. The latest one, they kind of build on each other, and without sounding confusing, we do this thing where right before this tour, what we're doing, we'll sit around in a circle, the four of us, right?
Okay.
One of us will play a short, repetitive musical phrase. do-do-do-do-do, whatever. Each of the other band members will then sort of complement that phrase with some kind of counter phrase until you have sort of a bed of sound going with everyone playing repetitive things. And the idea is that each person is listening to the other three, and as soon as they hear that the other three people have locked in, they yell, "Hey." So each person says, "Hey," and as soon as you yell, "Hey," the person to your right, the person to the right of the initiator of the exercise, then slightly modulates their phrase in some way, rhythmically, harmonically, or melodically, right? As soon as that happens, the other three members then slightly adjust their phrase to fit with the new phrase. And when you hear that all the other three people have locked into that new phrase, you scream, "Hey," again. And you can't move on to the next person until each person has screamed, "Hey." And you can't scream, "Hey," until you've heard that every person has locked into the new phrase. Now, it sounds weird and complicated, but the gist, the crux of the biscuit there is
the apostrophe. I know.
Right, is the apostrophe. No, the gist is that you have to be listening actively to every other person in the room that's playing with you, as opposed to sort of getting into your own guitar part or getting into your, one person, just focusing in on the drummer. It's very hard to listen actively to three different things at the same time.
Yeah, that was my next question. How do you concentrate on that? Yeah.
It's hard, and the exercise has been, it's great because then we've done exercises like this over the years when we practice, and it's tuned us into each other in really strong ways, so that when we're just free-form improvising or whatever up on stage, you find yourself listening more actively. A little bell goes off in your head if you've been ignoring what the keyboard player is doing or you've been ignoring what the drummer is doing. You start reaching out with your ears, and that's, I think, the most important aspect of improvised music, is listening.
How do you know about these exercises?
We made them up.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it started out with things like, I play a phrase and everyone imitates it exactly over a groove, which is also hard. You'd be amazed how many people would have trouble with that. If I started playing, and then everybody has to go, very, very simple, like the most basic level. But that's what, when you're communicating with each other and you're communicating with an audience in a live setting, you want to be able to get what's in your heart, straight out, without all this, blocks that it has to go through an instrument and a sound system and everything before it reaches somebody's ears. And the closer you can get to directly communicating with the other musicians and that thing that you're trying to say, the closer you can get to that, I think the more powerful the experience is for somebody who comes to the concert. And so these exercises and simplicity help that.
So you'll do that before you go on tour, or will you sit around this afternoon and do that?
No, because you have to have everybody in the same room, and that becomes hard on tour. But we do it before we go on tour. We practice a lot. We really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. You should try it.
Yeah, I can't. Unless it's on a typewriter, I can't do that.
You could do it on a typewriter.
You're probably right. I mean, if somebody can play a vacuum cleaner, or they can play a typewriter too. And in fact, Brian Eno's done some really interesting stuff on the typewriter.
Right.
Absolutely. So,
didn't John Cage do a typewriter?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I'm more familiar with the Eno stuff, but
right.
So
these days it would be a word processor, which doesn't make a very interesting sound.
Yeah, it makes kind of a clack. It's not really much fun, but it's a lot easier to type on. So
that's true.
I guess when you get up on stage, do you have any idea what's going to happen? I mean, is every night just completely different?
Every night's completely different, but I usually have some idea what's going to... I personally, more than anyone else in the band, have formed some kind of song list type thing. And the idea, though, is that you don't have to stick to it. And so figuring out cool song lists is something that I just like doing. So I'm always thinking in that way. It's like writing a big piece of music, And they're definitely different every night. And there's definitely an anything-goes attitude.
Is it risky, or are you that good that that it's not a problem?
No, it's a problem sometimes. And it usually is. This tour has been going very well. We've been just having... The more... It's a funny thing because if you get tense about it, you're going to run into problems. And if you just kind of let go of yourself and whatever, your fears and ego and that kind of thing, and get up on stage and just enjoy the experience of playing music, which was the reason that we all got into this in the first place. If you can maintain that, then it's amazing how much fun it is. And if you're having fun, that's what's translating out to the audience. If you're worried about proving something, inevitably you're kind of going to fail, I think.
What if you're worried about only proving that you're good enough? I mean, if you just want to prove to them, yeah, we're really good, and then I just wonder, does anybody ever get lost?
In the improv kind of thing?
Yeah, in the improv or anywhere.
Yeah, well, sometimes, it depends on what your mood is that day, or, what your girlfriend said when you called her on the phone, and all that stuff starts to come into play, and that's part of the risk. Somebody's sick. People are tired. We had one gig that I did just recently that I really thought we couldn't pull it together. And it was right after, it was the night after a gig that I thought was the best gig of the tour, possibly. And there's just no telling. I mean, you go out and you have this incredible show, and you think, oh, it all feels so simple and logical, and, the way everything's coming out. And then the next night, who knows?
Okay.
You're tired or something.
Now, you can tell. Can the audience tell?
I'll tell you that's a really good question. I'll tell you what I've decided.
All right.
I think that the audience can tell when it's really good. Everybody knows it. There's no denying it. If I'm having a bad night, I don't think that people can necessarily tell. Certain people might, but in general, there've been enough times when I've said, boy, that gig wasn't that great, and then I talk to people in the audience, and they all say that was the best show of the tour. And that happens a lot. But the only experience that I've seen that seems to be sort of universal is when something really, really great, truly great happens. I mean, out of the ordinary, spectacular. Everyone always seems to agree on that.
The songwriting process, is this similar at all to the improvisational exercises? Do songs come out of that?
Actually, pretty different experience. A lot of the stuff I write, I think, most of it, and Mike writes some songs, and that can swing all the way to the other side. Like on the new album, there's a song called All Things Reconsidered, and that's composed totally, note for note, all the instruments on paper, and everybody gets their part. That would be the extreme.
You did that? I mean, you wrote it out on paper for everybody?
Yeah.
Wow.
And
a band that can actually read music, it's incredible.
Yeah, we do we do that. And Mound, which is one that Mike wrote, has a big section in the middle of it that's all written out. It's really hard. It took a long time to learn. But the cool thing about that, again, is that if you go back and listen to that song, All Things Reconsidered, it's sort of like a fugue. It's not a strict fugue, but it means that each person is playing a single line, except the piano, which is playing two single lines. So it's a four-part piece, and it's all this one theme that's getting passed around from one part to another into the bass, blah, 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 all the way up to the end, never repeating. And when we play that, when you go through the process of learning that, which is pretty hard, it's a pretty long piece of music, and then to play it, you feel in the playing of something like that, you feel locked with the other musicians in such a precise clockwork sort of way that you experience what it's like to be in that sort of space. And then when you are improvising, it's kind of opened up a whole, having played the written out stuff, opens up a whole new realm in your mind of how good it could be. So you start striving for really hooking up with the other people as opposed to just kind of making a lot of noise or something. So that's a lot of fun too.
Yeah, I mean, you seem to be just unlimited as far as what you will write, can write, and you're not locked. The band doesn't seem to be at all locked into this. Well, we must write a song that sounds like X. I mean, I don't mean X the band. I just whatever. It just. So is that the way it is? I mean, you just go, well, here's an idea, and just go with it.
Pretty much, it's an open pad, I think, for anybody. And Mike, our bass player, just brought right before this tour, brought in this traditional Hebrew song. That's a 4-part a cappella thing, sung totally in Hebrew, and beautiful piece of music, and really hard. Nothing we'd ever done before. And there's always this. Actually, I think I'm happier about this than anything else about this particular band. Is that I don't think there's ever been a moment since the first couple of years of the band when someone said, "Let's try this," and everybody said, "Oh, we can't play that kind of,"
Right.
And we've tried lots of things that we just are out of our range of capacities as musicians, especially in the singing department. There's a thing. The first vocal line on Rift is this. It's a 3-part harmony that does the sort of train thing where it drops down a half step to the and we had written that in, and none of us are gifted singers by any stretch of the imagination, but we work at it. And when we got into the studio, we were working with Barry Beckett, who has worked with Aretha Franklin and Reba McEntire and all these really great singers. And we sang him that part. And the first thing that he said, it was sort of the first hurdle that we bumped into. He said, that kind of a thing is something that only really seasoned veteran harmony singing groups would try. You guys just aren't really that.
Yeah.
And we ended up practicing it for 2 weeks and doing it over and over again, trying to get it so that we could, trying to stay in pitch with 3 people dropping down and going back up again. And finally it ended up working out. But I don't know, there's always that kind of an attitude. Anything goes, give it a shot.
That must be fun. That's got to be a lot better than trying to sound like your last hit record or something like that.
Oh, boy. I would hate that.
Yeah. Taping is an interesting thing. You guys encourage it, and it apparently has really led to a widespread increase in the interest in the band. Do you think other bands are making a mistake by not allowing it?
No, I don't think so, because most other bands have sort of a similar show that they do every night.
Right.
So I know Metallica was letting people do it on the last tour.
Mm-hmm.
They had people taping it. The thing about taping for us is because it's sort of different every night. People trade the tapes around, and it ends up spreading the word. We don't really sell that many records, so far at least. Knock on wood. I don't know, but so when something really great happens, I want people to hear it,
Mm-hmm.
and you're excited about it, and I get really kind of get off on the idea that people are going to be trading the tape around. And I used to have bootleg tapes of, I can remember a bootleg tape of Dixie Dregs I had that was when I was in high school. I used to listen to all the time. Pat Metheny bootlegs when he was early. Bootleg tapes get around.
You're really into the obscure bootlegs,
Yeah, well, some of these people have huge libraries. Mostly it's dead stuff.
Yeah.
But people come to you sometimes with Xerox copies of their tape libraries, and they'll have 50 Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and all kinds of stuff. Some of it's good. Carlos Santana, when we did a tour with him, he's got a huge bootleg tape library. He's got something like 2,000 or 3,000 hours of Hendrix.
Wow.
Video and audio. And, Stevie Ray Vaughan, who's really into, and people like that.
I agree with you, I guess, now that I think about it. Who would want the tape of last night's Bon Jovi show, compared to the night before?
Because they're the same.
Yeah, exactly.
Once we've played the show, as far as I'm concerned, people might as well hear it if it's on a tape. It doesn't hurt.
Right.
I don't know what people are afraid of.
Royalties, I guess. They want their money.
I guess, cutting into album sales or something.
Yeah.
But
I would think that it'd just encourage people to go out and buy more.
Yeah, if they like the music, they're going to want to go buy the album.
Yeah, I mean, I doubt any Deadhead stops buying Dead albums because he gets tapes.
Right.
And speaking of the Dead, I guess you guys are compared to them all the time, and so just open-ended. Is there anything you want to say about that? To me, I'll say this. To me, it's a ridiculous comparison because the only comparison that I can really see is that you play a different show every night. But
right.
I mean, I don't consider the Dead adventurous in any sense. And,
right.
I mean, yeah, they play a different show every night, but it sounds exactly the same. And
right.
Whereas you guys, who knows?
Right. So, well, I mean, that's kind of my attitude. I mean, not. I don't think that. I think we're doing something different, but sometimes what I've found is he who's writing the article is going to, or she is going to have their own opinion, and it's better for. I mean, I think we're doing something different.
Yeah.
But you either, as the journalist, either do or don't. And that's going to come through. In the article, sort of,
I mean, in a way, it's kind of ironic because the Dead, I would say, have done two real different albums, Blues for Allah and Terrapin Station. And
right.
That generally, Deadheads don't like those albums, especially
Actually, that was the one that I thought was really cool.
Yeah. I mean, those are my two favorite ones of theirs, and I only own about 4. But it just seemed to me, Deadheads just kind of look down on those. But when you go to see them, I mean, everything is the same. I mean, I've seen them 5 years in a row now when they come through, and it's the same. Yeah, it's the same essential show. Yeah, I mean, all the songs kind of sound the same. They go off at the same time. They get lost at the same time. It's pretty different. So, and one other question along those lines, and of course I'm asking this with tongue firmly in cheek. In 25 years, do you expect to be a fat guy with a gray beard just coming out of a coma?
I'm not going to be coming out of. I better not be coming out of a coma.
Okay.
I don't abuse my body to that level. But I did have a hell of a night last night.
Yeah.
Kind of go out. I actually went and saw this thrash band and wild band downtown Cincinnati. We walked into this bar and Snowblind they were called, and they were 2 women, 2 men, and the lead person was a woman. Like it's a lot like Sonic Youth, sort of, but with their own personalities. Lots of feedback, and just this woman was wild. She was like almost motionless on stage, but this wild music going. And I remember at one point I'm getting off on a tangent now, but let me pull it back. Anyway, we went over to their house and jammed all night. It was great. We had like this loud jam in the basement. Okay.
That's really cool. Do people, when you walk around, people know who you are? Huh?
Well, they ended up kind of knowing who I, try to avoid it or something. I mean, no, not like it's starting to happen more, but it gets embarrassing sometimes a little bit, especially in that kind of a scenario because, I was there checking out their band and really liking their band. Whatever. I try to just ignore that.
Okay.
But anyway, what was the question?
We were just talking about you coming out of a coma, and then...
coming out of a coma and having a great beard, that's right. Well, I'm hoping to get rid of a little bit. I don't have a gut, but starting to roll on there a little bit. I want to get rid of that. No, I don't want to be like that. I don't know. Sometimes I think. I wish I could write for an orchestra, and sometimes I think. I don't know. I mean, now it's sort of like 2 different issues because musically, what happens, I think, with the success that comes and the touring that comes, that has been coming to us, is, for one thing, the time pressures grow hugely. It's harder to, when we were less successful, it was almost easier to be more adventurous in the songwriting. Though I think that last album we managed to continue to keep pushing some kind of new boundaries, which I'm psyched about. But just simply because of time. Because in order to write some of the really, like that thing I told you about, All Things Reconsidered,
Right.
and that took weeks of 8 hours a day, or 3 or 4 hours a day probably.
Okay.
But I mean, really, you should go back and listen to it. I mean,
No, I'm going to. Yeah.
it took weeks. It took 2 or 3 weeks, and it's only about 2 minutes long. But it's totally composed, and you have to sit at the piano every day with your pencil and your sharpener and your eraser, and like go back and change the beginning and go back and rebuild this so it has. And it's so much fun. I mean, it's like doing a crossword puzzle or playing chess or something. But it takes time, and we don't have time anymore right now. I mean, we were on the road for 3.5 months, and then we were off for like a month and a half, at which point I was just, moving into a house, actually. And then we went back on the road for 7 weeks, which is now. We're home for 2 weeks, and then we're in L.A. for 3 months doing an album.
Oh.
So this is maybe a roundabout way of answering your question about where am I going to be in 20 years. I'd like to have a family, kids, and some time maybe off the road. But then again, I also love playing live, so touring goes along with playing live. That's as far as I can think about it, I think.
All right. Just 2 other things. I'll let you go. Is there anything you want to tell people about the band or the show or the album that we haven't talked about?
Not that I can think of.
Okay. And the other question I wanted to ask you for another story I'm working on is I want you to look in your crystal ball and tell me the year 2000, what do you think music is going to be like?
Oh, that's a good question. Good question. Oh, God, I've thought about that. It's definitely seeming to swing a certain way. I think people are... Gosh. What do you think it's going to be like? You seem to be thinking about this a lot.
Yeah, I haven't got a real clear idea. I mean, part of me thinks that it's gotten so fractured that it's just going to continue to fragment to the point where you can be friends with somebody and live next door to them and be listening to completely different music.
Right.
I'm 34, and a friend of mine at work and I always have this conversation when we listen to the same music growing up, even though I grew up in New York and he grew up in Indianapolis. We have the same experience. We listen to top 40 radio and we listen to soul music as well as, rock and whatever. And we have a common experience, but now kids really don't have that same thing. Because there's radio to appeal to absolutely every little...
And then you've got the whole black music, white music.
Right, and it's always struck me as interesting if you watch like a movie or a television show that's based around the 50s or before that, everybody knows the same songs.
Right.
And now you look at it, and I mean, it'd be very hard to, beyond Happy Birthday and the national anthem, I can't think of too many songs that everybody knows the words to. So, I don't know, that's sort of been my feeling about it, but
that's a great point. I hadn't really thought of it. Boy. I mean, it's got to have something to do with the state of our country, and maybe in other countries it's different. I don't know. I'm wondering about Canada, and if it's going in that direction in Canada, the way it is here.
Well, probably, I would think. Just maybe.
Do you think that's a worldwide phenomenon or a national phenomenon?
Well, maybe it's national because we have so much more media than everybody else. But I don't know. I mean, it also seems to me like Phish would have been a bigger band in the 70s because I think he would have gotten on the radio real easily.
Oh, well, that whole thing. Just, I mean, radio is just getting so conservative. I think if it wasn't for, I mean, we haven't made a video yet by conscious choice because I'm not all that big a fan of that either. But and we will actually. This is just opening up a whole new conversation. But radio, I think, is I think if it wasn't for MTV, if there's one thing you could say for MTV, if it wasn't for MTV, you wouldn't have, Nirvana and Pearl Jam.
Maybe you wouldn't. I think you'd have them. I don't think you'd have them as fast. But
I don't think they would have gotten the radio. I'm just finding out more and more. Radio is ultra conservative.
Yeah.
Ultra conservative.
But you could look at it in another way. For example, you're coming here. You're going to sell out most likely a 1,900-seat theater. I haven't seen an ad for it.
Oh, really?
Okay, or heard an ad for it. I guess they probably didn't think it was really that important.
Right.
Maybe there have been ads, and they just didn't come my way.
Uh-huh.
But
they certainly haven't heard anything on the radio.
Yeah, well, it's a weird kind of radio town. I mean, we've got the big rock station place. I think it's the all John Mellencamp station.
Oh, yeah.
All Mellencamp all the time. And then we have an adult alternative station that's really good. I mean, tends to play a lot of stuff that I like, even though they're not particularly adventurous. And I don't know if people would know exactly where they would try to sell your band to advertise it and get people to come out to the show. Although I think it's going to sell out word of mouth wise.
Right.
Anyway. It's hard to say where things like that go, but it occurs to me that if you were around in the 70s and there were fewer bands, then there were fewer bands competing for
Right.
things, and the stations were more wide open, that you'd be on the radio without any trouble. Whereas now, I mean, I'm sure nobody has any idea where to put you.
No, and they've tried. Our record company is scratching their heads.
Yeah.
We're selling way more concert tickets than records. None of the radio stations. There's nothing. We didn't put a single on the radio. We got into this concept thing, and off it went. So
Yeah.
but I like it. So.
Well, as long as they can live with that, that's not bad. But
at least they feel like, at least we're not getting. I mean, one of the higher level executives came to a show recently in Boston, and in Boston it's kind of our most popular area, so we had sold out like a 17,000 seat venue.
Oh my God! Did you play Boston Garden? Or?
No, we played at Great Woods.
Oh, okay.
And he came backstage, all he could say was, well, you guys are doing your job. I guess we're not doing ours or something, because, I mean, I don't care. I'm having a great time. Things are going fine for me.
Well, I've written about it and suggested that radio is should be a place where you learn. Because when I was a kid, that's where you learn about music. I mean,
Right.
That's where I first heard virtually everything that I like.
Right.
Whereas that doesn't even come close to happening now.
No.
I mean, even before I had this job, just as a general consumer, I would either hear it from a friend or read about it, or there would any other way but radio. Radio wasn't telling me anything that I needed to know.
This is why we rely so much on the concert taping and stuff, because I mean, what you just said, hearing it from a friend and getting a tape from a friend. The other thing that we found is that because of the state of radio, you're not gonna. It doesn't mean anything anymore. I think, I remember growing up, it was kind of a special thing. Maybe it still is for kids. I don't know. A special thing though, listening to the radio and waiting for. And now, I don't know. It's just it doesn't mean much. And I think if your crowd if you've developed your crowd through word of mouth, one friend telling this other friend, or hearing some kind of bootleg tape or something, I think you're just a lot more excited and intent on coming and having the experience of the concert and really getting into it. Whereas if you've got some radio hit these days, the people that show up at the concert it's just a whole different feeling than
They're sitting on their hands waiting for the radio. Yeah.
And everything else is. I've seen it happen with some friends.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like it's built to be very disposable, and that's why you see so many of these one-hit wonders. And I mean, they're more now than there have ever been, I think. And they just come and go. They have a hit or two, and they can't follow it up, and by the time they follow it up, people aren't interested anyway. They've moved on to the next thing.
New band.
Yeah. So anyway, back to the question: where is music going to be in 2000? Do you think?
I'd like to think that there's going to be a backlash against this kind of conservatism, and that people will start trying new things, and sort of some kind of underground upheaval would start, and a whole bunch of underground bands, and then maybe some good college radio stations, and then maybe some brave. This is the optimistic view here. Some brave radio station would realize that people are sick of it and really want to hear something different. Hopefully, the pendulum will swing. It'll go the other way.
Yeah.
I mean, the economy is going to have a lot to do with, the 80s. You had this a horrible period for music, and it was in the middle of this whole Reagan thing. And now, we're, economically and on this downslide, and maybe that, I think that sometimes results in good music.
Well, it's possible, I guess.
You don't sound too.
Well, I think there's a lot of really good music out there, and I think it's not getting to people. And
right.
I'm always very quick to blame radio for that, and but I don't know. I don't. It's hard to tell. I'm sitting here. I'm looking at. I got a stack of about 30 CDs on my desk. A lot of great music, most of which I'm sure no one's ever heard or heard of.
Right.
And I think that's kind of bad. I think that's bad for music. And, it's bad when they get the mentality that if you don't sell 10 million records, then you failed somehow.
Yeah. Oh, that is. We've actually had to have, and it's been. Our relationship with the record company has been very good, but there even just the slightest tinge of that, that I've gotten from the record company has resulted in me making a couple phone calls and saying, "Look, we have in no way failed. This is exactly what we've always wanted to be. I feel like we made a great record. It's challenging, it's different. No one ever expected it. None of us ever expected it to sell because we knew there was nothing for the radio." And you can fall into that trap. And I think even in their defense, even people in the record company, sometimes there's not really evil intent, but suddenly you wake up one morning and you realize you've been viewing it as a failure. Oh, this record sold less than our last record. And, our concert tickets have doubled or something. So, from an industry standpoint, that's kind of I guess that's a failure. You want to double your record sales with each record or something like that, as a general rule.
Plus, I think you are going to get, since you get lumped into that Spin Doctors stuff.
Oh, that was a big.
Then that's a killer, because then they go, well, Spin Doctors sold 5 million records. Why haven't you sold 5 million records?
Oh yeah, that happened. There was this sudden push, like, we're going to break Phish, right? And it wasn't going to happen. And I know those guys have to go back in now. They're friends of mine. They're all out doing that because we used to play with them a lot.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see if they can.
Yeah, they're a good band. They've come through a couple of times on this tour, and they have been very different. The first time, very loose and jammy, and just that kind of happy sounding Little Miss Can't Be Wrong. The set generally sounded like that.
Right.
Last time they came through, really just harsh, very, very straightforward, really darker sounding band. It was really cool. They had evolved. It almost seemed like they were saying, "Hey, you guys are going to lump us in this category, but we're not that song, and we're going to go on." We're good players, and we're going to show you. And
that's great.
They did. So
that was the Soul Asylum thing.
Yeah,
came through twice.
No, the first time they came through on their own, and then the second time they came through with the Alternative Nation tour. Yeah, Soul Asylum was just awful, but the Spin Doctors were real surprising. That was a real good night.
That's great. Great to hear.
But I mean, I imagine you're just running into tons of that kind of.
Well, we were. It's over.
Yeah.
I mean, Soul Asylum's a big band now.
Yeah.
Cover the Rolling Stone, in the 15 minutes or whatever.
Right.
Which is good. They're probably relieved, so they can move on to their next album.
Well, I don't know what their plan is, but when they were here, they seemed to be doing everything to countermand what they had achieved so far. They just came out and played one of the sloppiest sets that I've seen in a long time, especially from a band that was that was supposed to be out there trying to push itself.
Right.
Came out and just they did 5 covers in a row at one point in the set.
Really?
Yeah, including Earache My Eye by Cheech and Chong.
Really?
And, yeah.
What? Now, when was this?
This was a few weeks ago, about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Great. They're. I did see them right near the beginning of the tour.
Yeah.
And they hadn't gotten that. I think they were doing still the show.
Right.
I think at that point, but at the beginning of this big. Maybe what happened was they, like I said, I was talking to them and everything. I was definitely sensing a little bit of nearing a breaking point.
Yeah.
Which is good. It sounds like they hit it. They picked a great producer for their next album. And what I mean by great is, I'm spacing on the guy's name right now, but great in the sense that not a pop hit rock producer.
This is Soul Asylum you're talking about?
No, I was talking about...
Oh, I'm talking about the Spin Doctors, okay.
Oh, you're talking about Soul Asylum?
Yeah, I have been talking about Soul Asylum. Yeah, no, Soul Asylum was the one who came out and played really sloppy and did a lot of covers and stuff. Spin Doctors came out and just absolutely just cranked it up.
That's great.
Yeah, they were very good. Anyway, well, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if there was anything else you wanted to add, that'd be fine.
I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time. Unfortunately, you're here on the same night as Clint Black, so I'll be at the Clint Black show, but hopefully you'll come back.
We'll be back. We're always on the road, it seems like.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Tapes Archive podcast. Please remember you can always find more information about the show and the individual episodes at our website, thetapesarchive.com. Until next time, the vault is closed. Hey, before you go, we have a quick message from one of our friends over at the Osiris Podcast Network.
The Helping Friendly podcast explores the music and fan experience of Phish through interviews and deep dives on shows and tours.
And Quick Hits, a review of every show of the tour the next day with someone who was there.
We started HF Pod in 2013 to bring the fan voice into the discussion. We're 6 years in, and with the help of our guests, we're still discovering new angles of appreciation for the band we all love.
Whether you're new to Phish or you've been listening for years, we think you'll find something to enjoy on HF Pod.
Search for the Helping Friendly podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, or find us on the web at hfpod.com.